Ever notice how life loves to throw curveballs? Like right when you think things are going smoothly, bam, crisis mode.
It's like you can't catch a break.
Exactly. And we're tackling that head on in this deep dive.
Should be interesting. Where are we starting?
Well, we're taking a deep dive into a chapter from My Turn to Care by Dr. Warwick Cooper.
Okay, caregiving in a crisis, that's a heavy one.
It is, and he doesn't shy away from the tough stuff. But what really struck me was how he uses this Chinese word, chu. It's pronounced wēijī.
wēijī. I've heard that before, but what's it have to do with crisis?
It actually means crisis, but it encapsulates this idea that within every crisis, there's both danger and opportunity.
Oh, that's interesting. So it's not all doom and gloom. There's a potential upside.
Precisely, and he illustrates this beautifully with the story of Janice and James.
Janice and James.
Yeah, they're this couple in the book, seemingly perfect life, but then they get hit with this major financial curveball.
Ouch, that's rough. So how'd they handle it?
That's where those three components of a crisis come in. The ones Dr. Cooper talks about, the triggering event, so in this case, the financial hit.
Right, that makes sense.
Then there's how they perceive that event. Do they see it as the end of the world or an opportunity for a fresh start?
Perspective is everything.
Exactly. And finally, there's their ability to cope, their toolkit for dealing with the emotional and logistical fallout.
So it's not just about what happens to you, but how you react to it.
Exactly. And Janice and James, they really highlight how crucial it is to have healthy coping mechanisms in place before crisis hits.
Like having that support system ready to go.
Exactly. They lean on their faith, their community, they even sought professional help.
Which is huge. So many people wait until things are really bad before reaching out.
It's like Dr. Cooper says, it's like waiting until the horse has already left the barn.
Too true. Prevention is key.
Absolutely. But it's not always that straightforward, is it? The things that can trigger a crisis, they're all over the map.
Oh, I can only imagine. From accidents to losing loved ones.
He talks about all of that: accidents, natural disasters, job loss, even those big life transitions like divorce or, even having a baby.
Wow, so even the happy changes can be stressors.
Exactly. He talks about this thing called the Holmes and Rahe stress scale. It actually measures stress levels associated with different life events.
No way. I gotta look that up. Sounds fascinating.
It is, and it really highlights how even positive transitions can impact our well-being.
So it's really about how we adapt and cope with any kind of change, big or small.
You got it. And it's not just about our individual response either. It's about understanding that everyone experiences crises differently.
Right, like that example he gave about the flood in the Philippines.
Yeah.
Same event, completely different reactions from people.
Exactly. It all comes back to perception and those coping mechanisms.
And having that support network. It's amazing how much easier it is to navigate tough times when you don't feel alone.
100%. And that's where I think Dr. Cooper's insights are so valuable. He gives you this framework for understanding crisis, both the challenges and the potential.
It's like that Chinese word wēijī, right? Danger and opportunity all wrapped up in one.
Exactly. And it got me thinking, about those moments in my own life where I felt like I was facing a crisis. And what really gets me is how he breaks down these different types of crises, because it's not a one-size-fits-all kind of thing, right?
No, not at all.
Yeah.
I mean, a car accident's a whole different ball game than, say, going through a divorce.
Totally. And Dr. Cooper, he actually categorizes them, which I found super helpful. Like, you've got those accidental crises, the stuff you just don't see coming.
Right, like a sudden illness or, like you said, a car accident. Those can really throw you for a loop.
And it's interesting because he doesn't just talk about the emotional side, he gives really practical advice too.
Oh, like what?
Well, for example, he talks about how important it is to document everything after a car accident. Like, I honestly wouldn't have thought about that in the heat of the moment.
That's a good point. In all that chaos, it's easy to forget those things. It's like your brain goes on autopilot.
Totally. He actually shares this story about how he got into a car accident himself and ended up praying with the other driver, the one who was at fault.
Wow. It's amazing how even in those high-stress situations, those moments of grace can really make a difference.
It really is. It speaks to his point about trying to, approach these situations with as much, compassion as possible.
Which I imagine is easier said than done sometimes, especially when you're dealing with the aftermath of something like an accident.
Oh, absolutely. But then there are those other types of crises he talks about, the ones that are less about a single event and more about navigating a process, like you said, divorce, death of a loved one, even losing a job.
Those are tough because it's not just a one and done kind of thing. It's this ongoing process of grief and adjustment.
Exactly. And I really appreciate how Dr. Cooper acknowledges that it's okay to not be okay in those moments. Like he
Yeah.
talks about his own experience with grief after losing his son, and it's really powerful.
It's like he's giving you permission to feel those emotions, to grieve in your own way, which
Mm,
I think is so important because everyone processes these things differently.
100%. And he talks about how crucial it is to seek support during those times, whether it's from loved ones, therapy, even support groups. It's not a weakness, it's actually a sign of strength.
And he ties those life-changing events, those major life transitions, back to that Holmes and Rahe stress scale we talked about earlier.
Oh, right. Because even though they're not sudden, like a car accident,
Yeah.
they still represent these massive shifts that can really throw you off balance.
Exactly. It's
Yeah.
like your whole world is changing, and that takes a toll.
And that's where, again, those coping mechanisms are so essential. It's like he said with Janice and James, having that support system already in place can make all the difference.
And not just having people to lean on, though that's huge, but also having those healthy coping skills for yourself, like exercise, eating well, prioritizing sleep, simple stuff, but it makes a world of difference.
It's about taking care of yourself so you can be there for others. It's like that saying, you can't pour from an empty cup.
So true.
Mm.
And Dr. Cooper, he talks about that a lot, especially for caregivers, because they're often so busy taking care of everyone else that they forget about themselves.
It's easy to let self-care slip when you're in crisis mode, right? But he emphasizes how important it is. Even small things can make a difference.
Absolutely. And seeking help, that's a big part of self-care too. It's not selfish, it's necessary. But you know what I thought was really interesting? How he talked about crises as opportunities for growth.
Easier said than done, right? I mean, when you're in the middle of it, all you can see is the struggle.
It's true, it's like trying to see the forest for the trees. But he gave that great example of seniors who are initially resistant to moving into assisted living.
Right, they see it as a loss of independence.
Exactly. But for many, it becomes this unexpected opportunity for connection, for purpose, even joy.
There's that perspective shift again. What we might initially see as a negative can open up these whole new possibilities.
It's like that Chinese word again, wēijī, danger and opportunity, always intertwined. But it got me thinking about something he mentioned toward the end of the chapter, about crisis theory.
Crisis theory, that sounds a little, I don't know.
Heavy?
Yeah, a bit like something you'd study in a textbook.
I get it, but it's actually pretty fascinating once you dig into it.
Okay, so what's the deal with crisis theory?
Well, think of it like this. It's a way to understand how people react and adapt during those really difficult times. Like, why do some people bounce back from adversity while others, really struggle?
So it's not about having like a step-by-step guide for every crisis, but more about understanding those common threads.
Exactly. And that's where the opportunity for growth comes in. Dr. Cooper, he argues that by recognizing those patterns, we can develop healthier coping mechanisms and become more resilient.
Makes sense, like building a stronger foundation so we're less likely to crumble when those curveballs inevitably come our way.
Exactly. It's about understanding that uncertainty, change, even those big scary crises, they're all just part of life.
We can't prevent them, but we can control how we respond.
Exactly. And that's a big part of what Dr. Cooper emphasizes.
So it's less about eliminating challenges and more about equipping ourselves to deal with them.
I think that's a great way to put it because
Yeah.
even in those really difficult moments, there's potential for positive change if we're open to it.
There's that word again, potential. It all comes back to that Chinese word, doesn't it? Wēijī. That idea that danger and opportunity are kind of two sides of the same coin.
It's so true. And I think that's what's so powerful about Dr. Cooper's approach. He doesn't sugarcoat the difficulties of navigating crises, especially when you're caring for someone else.
Because let's face it, caregiving is hard enough even without a crisis thrown in the mix.
100%. But he also reminds us that those experiences, as tough as they can also lead to incredible personal growth.
It's about finding that silver lining.
It might be hard to see at first, but it's often there. And, it might take time to recognize how a crisis has changed us, sometimes for the better.
Sometimes you just need a little bit of distance to see things clearly.
I think that's so true. And that newfound strength, that resilience, that's what we can carry with us.
Ready to face the next challenge. It makes you think about how we define crisis, doesn't it?
How so?
Well, is it always a negative thing, a roadblock? Or could it be, in a way, an opportunity? A chance to discover strengths we didn't know we had?
I love that. It's not about seeking out crises, but about changing our perspective, being open to the possibility of growth.
Exactly. And on that note, I think we've given our listeners a lot to chew on today. Dr. Cooper's book really does offer a unique perspective on navigating those inevitable curveballs life throws our way, especially in the realm of caregiving.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And if you take away just one thing from this deep dive, let it be that Chinese word wēijī, crisis, as both danger and opportunity. Because it's in those challenging moments that we often discover our greatest strength and resilience.
Beautifully said. And remember, you don't have to navigate those challenges alone. Reach out, build your support system, and never underestimate your own capacity for growth. Until next time.
Take care.